The economy firing on all cylinders, backed by even more impressive data out today. We're talking the U.S. jobs report, 213,000 non-farm payroll jobs last month, 18,000 more than Wall Street expected. The unemployment rate rose to 4% in June from an 18-year low of 3.8%. But that increase was driven by a gigantic jump in labor force. 601,000 Americans hit the bricks looking for a job because they feel great. In fact, it's underscored by a new Gallup poll report that shows more than half of Americans say the country's best years are still ahead of it. Here now to discuss, Ned Ryan, American Majority CEO, former Bush 43 presidential writer, Beverly Hallberg, District Media Group president, Heather Higgins with us. She's Independent Voice CEO, and Lawrence Jones, Campus Reform Editor-in-Chief. Beverly, let me start with you. A great jobs report. Some people are quibbling about wages, and I know they could be higher. I think they will go higher. Nevertheless, it was better than Wall Street expected, and we are learning more and more that despite the negative headlines that never seem to stop, Americans are feeling really good right now.
And I'm going to throw out some more data towards you. One of those numbers is that it's the second lowest black unemployment rate we've seen. It's the lowest Hispanic unemployment rate we have ever seen. And we're at an 8-year low when it comes to food stamp enrollment. So there are a lot of great numbers out there. People are still wondering where the tariff and potential trade war can go. But so far, it hasn't hurt the economy very much. And I think part of this is a certainty that people have from tax reform. Businesses are hiring. People are getting back to work. So these are great numbers.
By the way, I've got the architect, the man of the moment, Peter Navarro. He wanted this. He got it. He's going to be on the show later on. I can't wait to talk to him about that. But to that point, Heather, not only was Hispanic unemployment the rate low, but it was low for the right reasons. 164,000 more Hispanics came to the labor force last month. 250,000 more Hispanic Americans had a job last month than the month before. What about women? 646,000 women entered the labor force last month alone. 347,000 of them got new jobs. I mean, these are remarkable numbers.
They are. And they once again show the disconnect between first the elite consensus, which is almost always wrong, and then the language that you see. A lot of the polling data is always, how do you feel about Trump? But not, what do you feel about whether you agree with what he's doing? And the lived experience of so many Americans is this is all going right. They see more jobs. They see their friends getting better jobs. They see opportunity. They see the taxes and the deregulation moving in the right direction. They are very excited. And so this increase in labor force participation is fabulous, particularly if you contrast it with where we were in 2012 and, you know, what was considered the cap that you could possibly get on unemployment and labor force participation.
I mean, I often have people send me on Twitter, troll me on Twitter, and they'll say, hey, you know, the unemployment rate went down under President Obama. It did, but that was because millions of Americans dropped out of the labor force. That's not why you want the unemployment rate to go down. In fact, Ned, what I say is that 601,000, that's the best poll out there. You know, I love these polls, to Heather's point. I see how they set them up, and they'll say, hey, do you think Trump is a nice guy? No. Do you think Trump did this? No. Do you think Trump? Then at the end, hey, what about the economy? I mean, if you just said no 5 times, you're going to say no again. We know those polls can be suspect, but 601,000 people saying, I feel something great going on in this country, and I'm going to start looking for a job.
Yeah, no, and I think there's some other interesting dynamics taking place, Charles, as well. I mean, first of all, this is a triumph of common sense. Amazing what happens when you actually inject fuel back into the economy with tax cuts, and then you break off the shackles of regulations. It's amazing what can happen, but it's just common sense. But there's some other interesting dynamics that are taking place, political shifts that are taking place, I think, because of this economic news. Reuters did a poll back in 2016 of 18 to 34-year-old young Americans, white Americans, showing that by a margin of 14 points, they favored the Democratic Party. They did that same poll just a few days ago. That 14-point margin is gone. It's now 39 to 39 among those young Americans in party versus party. The other interesting dynamic, last week, we saw Hispanics giving Trump a 10-point boost in approval ratings among that community. And so I think one of those interesting dynamics is, again, the political shifts that are taking place in certain demographics because of this economic news.
Sure. I mean, listen, that poll shift for Hispanics telegraphed the 250,000 jobs that were created in that community. Lawrence, you know, again, though, the headlines won't reflect any of the stuff that we're talking about. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately because the same tide lifts all ships, and I hate to see Americans miss out on an opportunity that we have been waiting around for a long time. Listen, President Obama inherited a bad hand. It was a tough, great recession. We all get that. Now things are looking fantastic. We're going beyond green shoots, and I would love to see everybody participate.
Yeah, Charles, I think the president has an opportunity here because he has been able to deliver on his campaign promises. But how are we going to get those communities, the black community, the Hispanic community, to know that this was the president's doing? Well, the president has to go in those communities and talk about how he delivered on that message, because that's what the president should be gearing toward. Because of the economy, because he's been so successful in this area, he has something to run on, Charles, but he has to go after those voters.
I agree. I think that's a great idea. I suggested that even during the campaign. Hey, you know, go out there. Now he's really got a track record to tout, so maybe he'll do that. I know he's comfortable in Montana and those kind of places, but you got to go all over this country because it's a great message. Beverly, Americans seeing that the best is still to come. That's a brightening thing. That's the highest level, I think, in at least 12, 16 years, if I recall, for this Gallup poll. We have to be optimistic because I think no matter what, part of success is self-fulfilling. You've got to see it. You've got to believe it can happen in order for it to happen.
Well, part of this as well, in addition to it's the economy, stupid, and people do feel like I can be productive again, I can get back to work. I'm even curious to see, as more people go back to work, what happens to the opioid addiction and the epidemic. I hope that we see people use less and less drugs as they find more fulfilling things to do. But another side of this is foreign policy. And when you take a look at ISIS and knowing that we have had tremendous success against ISIS, there is security in feeling safer about terrorism. So it's also safety in that sense, and also feeling like their kids may have a better life than they did. There was a lot of concern about that a few years ago, and so there's a huge shift, and unfortunately not all the networks are covering the positive aspects of the economy. You
know, that brings me to my favorite.
Charles.
Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, Charles, I think that's a huge problem, too, when you look at this. The White House has to be disciplined now. We have to, they have to keep the message on the economy, because at the end of the day, that's what the American people feel. But when you look at the other networks, they're talking about things that the American people don't care about. Good grief, they're talking about illegal immigrants right now. That is the message of the Democratic Party, and the American people don't care about that. And so the president can't depend on the big four networks to deliver that message for him. That's why he communicates on Twitter. That's why he sets the tone every single day for the news cycle.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Of course, one network is upset because on Jeopardy, no one could get Michael Flynn. All three contestants didn't know that was the answer to a question. I want to talk about something Beverly touched on, the opioid addiction and jobs in the heartland. I call them dirty fingernail jobs. Heather, this is my favorite part of the report. Goods producing jobs, 4,000 mining, 13,000 construction, 36 manufacturing. I mean, these are jobs that people said would never come back to this country.
Yeah, do you remember there was an Obama interview in, I think it was the spring, like June of 2016, where he was telling people that, you know, those jobs were really kind of gone forever and they needed to adjust. What we're seeing is that, in fact, jobs are coming back. That, in fact, I think that you're going to see tremendous surprises on the upside. You've got the Chicken Littles decrying tariffs and what's going to happen with this giant trade wars that we're heading for a depression. In fact, it's a negotiation.
Sure.
Trump wants a level playing field. The Chinese want a tilted playing field. They're going to end up someplace in the middle, and both of them will claim a domestic victory. It will yield tremendous inflows for the U.S., and you're already seeing that in the markets, which are smarter than most people, generally speaking. Sure. The U.S. market is doing much better than the Shanghai index, which is down 17 points, and that's before you add the other 3 points that it's down with the currency moves. So there's a lot for the U.S. to gain. It's not even priced in yet, and we're not even seeing it yet in terms of the jobs and the trade.
And the Shenzhen, which is their technology market, down 49% from their high 2.5 years ago.